Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Lula, and today I'm going to talk to you about solving chess puzzles. So I'm sure by this point we've all heard CCA, checks, captures, and attacks. These are the three tools that most chess coaches will give you for solving puzzles. But how do you figure out if there's a tactic in a regular chess game or notice a tactical motif if you're struggling to solve a puzzle? CCA can be a very helpful acronym for us when we are trying to figure out what move to play in chess, and its utility goes beyond solving puzzles. If you don't know what to do in a position, then you can think CCA, checks, captures, and attacks, and you can go through this checklist to figure out if you have any of these options before looking for a quieter, more strategic move. We should always prioritize the moves that win the quickest if we have calculated those moves correctly. However, your tactical vision is something that develops over time, and so I have a couple of tools for you to use on the way whilst you're working on it. Today I'm going to be talking you through 5 tools that you can use to help you solve puzzles or find a puzzle in a regular game. Make sure you stick around for number 5 because it is the hardest and it will take you the longest to master. So let's say you're looking at a chess position. It doesn't necessarily have to be a puzzle in a book or online, but you think that maybe this is a critical moment in the game. Maybe your opponent wasted some time in the opening, played some strange moves, or something just doesn't feel right. So what are we looking for? Number 1 is LPDO, another acronym for you, which stands for loose pieces drop off. This is a term coined by John Nunn, and it basically means a piece that is not defended by a pawn or other pieces. Remember that a loose piece is not attacked, but it's not defended either, which means that it is highly susceptible to tactics like forks. If in doubt, scan all of the pieces on the board, not including the pawns, of course, and make sure that all of your pieces are defended and check to see if any of the enemy pieces are loose. If they are, there may still not be a tactic, but this is a very useful piece of information for you when trying to set up traps and tactics. Number 2, let's assume none of those pieces were loose, but something still feels off. Okay, number 2 is pieces that just look weird. Over time in chess, you will develop a sense of positional understanding. You will know where the pieces belong or where they feel good, where they're supposed to go. Of course, this skill in itself requires a degree of nuance. Let's think about an enemy queen that is all up in your business. This could be a very real threat. Are they threatening checkmate? Having the queen near your king never feels good. Or is that queen misplaced? Does she feel like she's not backed up by the enemy pieces? Maybe your opponent has come over with just a queen and literally nobody else. Is that queen scary or is she trapped? Pieces that look like they are where they shouldn't be are vulnerable to attacks, especially when they are near your pieces. Somebody wanders into the wrong side of town and all of a sudden they are surrounded by the enemy. Things won't end well for them. In chess, when pieces are out of place, at some point you start to notice. The pieces should all work together harmoniously, and there should be a sense of balance in your army. If the pieces are not working together, then this is usually something that we can punish. It doesn't have to be an enemy piece in your territory. It could be that your opponent has left their king undefended. This is what I mean, it goes both ways. You need to make sure that you have a good control over your territory, and if you're going to venture into the enemy territory, you need to have reinforcements. At the same time, if you see the opportunity to attack and your opponent has put all of their pieces on the other side of the board, then that is the time to start looking at how you can attack the king. Very often there are sacrifices like the Greek gift. Following on from this is number 3, which is squares that are only defended by the king. There is a reason that the f7 square is so often a target of attack in chess, and it is because it is the only square defended only by the king in black's starting position. The king does not make a very good defender because he is the main target. To a lesser extent, the queen is also not a good defender because she is the strongest piece. Pawns are excellent defenders because they themselves have little value. Make sure that you take a look at squares which are not particularly well defended, especially when those squares are near the enemy king. I'm not necessarily talking about grabbing a random stray pawn on the other side of the board. Number 4 is a development on that, and I'm going to call it focal points. I think that focal points is an idea that was first introduced to me by Grandmaster Irina Krush, and she told me that when we have so many pieces pointing all towards the same squares, there has to be some point of interest there. Let's say you get presented with a puzzle where you have a queen and bishop battery and you have a knight, and they're all looking towards the exact same square. Do you think that that is a coincidence? Probably not. You need to ask yourself, is this our focal point? Is this the point of attack? And if your puzzle is a little bit more complicated, then maybe this is not the only focal point. Maybe this is not the only square to be looking at. This is incredibly principled because if you think about it, usually we place our pieces so that they are controlling the most important squares. This is why in the opening we develop our pieces towards the middle. And this is why in openings like the Italian, we play bishop to c4. Bobby Fischer said this was the best square for the bishop because it looks at the f7 square. It is not just about our pieces being well placed, it is about the squares that those pieces control. Number 5 is the most difficult, and it is when checks, captures, attacks doesn't work. You can't figure out if there are any real focus points or loose pieces, or even maybe any threats from the opponent. Maybe the position just looks normal. In that case, sometimes we want to threaten to make a threat or play something prophylactic. And so that is why number 5 is quiet moves. Quiet moves is kind of the attack part of checks, captures, and attacks, except sometimes it can be much more subtle than threatening checkmate in one. When I say we could threaten to make a threat, what I mean is we could maybe cut the king off. Maybe we put him in a mating net. Maybe we make it such that we don't have checkmate right now, but he has no way of escaping our incoming attack. In these cases, sometimes a quiet move is much more effective than something like a check. I had a coach that once said that there are only 3 good types of checks. I think the message that not all checks are good checks is incredibly useful. I think that beginners and lower rated players often think that if there is a check, they should play it because it's a free move. And it's a free move because it's forcing and your opponent has to either move their king, block, or capture your piece that is checking. And so therefore it feels like you get to play an extra turn. This is not always the case. Checking can be the worst move on the board sometimes. And so this is why we really need to take checks, captures, attacks with just a little bit of a grain of salt, because sometimes we really do need to look for a quiet move. These moves are equally important, even if they are not as flashy. Okay, so what if you have thought about all of this, gone through checks, captures, and attacks, and these 5 tools that I've just given you, and you still can't figure out what is going on? Maybe there just isn't a tactic, because I assume that we are not only applying this to puzzles, but to our real life games, because our real life games are where it matters to be able to solve the positions and solve the puzzles. Finding the correct answer to a tactic is nice and definitely helps us to develop our muscle memory, calculation skills and become better chess players. But if we can't convert that to our real games, then what's the point? So I am assuming that you're looking at a position and you still don't know what to do after you've gone through all of this. The answer may very well be that there is no tactic or way to easily set up a tactic or even way to attack the king or anything really. And sometimes that's the case. Sometimes your position is so closed or so symmetrical that it seems like you don't really have much activity. And unfortunately, that is a reality of chess that is not very fun. In fact, for most turns of your chess game, you'll be going through checks, captures, and attacks, and you won't be able to find anything. And that is normal. But if you want to hone your tactical senses, then I was once recommended by a friend that every turn of my classical chess game, I should genuinely look for checks, captures, and attacks. And to be fair, they're right, because I have missed tactics in the opening in classical games before, because, you know, in my brain, it's the opening, my opponent has made what seems like a reasonable move, I'm just going to castle my king. But no, sometimes there really is something there. So we should be checking, if we have the time, every turn for checks, captures, and attacks. And then when there's nothing there, this is when we play positional chess. Positional chess is improving our pieces, castling, completing development, and then coming up with like a strategy, putting our pieces on the best squares, figuring out how we can kind of coordinate them to control specific squares or to control specific files or to infiltrate the position. And this is very, very important. This is equally as important as tactics. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that these 5 tools for solving puzzles were helpful to you. Let me know in the comments below if you have any of your own techniques for solving puzzles or things that I haven't mentioned. Please post any questions that you may have down below that I didn't answer in this video, and I will try to answer as many as possible. And I will see you next time. Bye, guys.